One of the major consumer safety concerns in recent years is the explosion of coffee pods, those little convenience capsules. Millions of Americans are being forced to consider what exactly they have been drinking as a result of urgent retail recalls and federal warnings that span 48 states. Is it possible for a morning cup that is supposed to provide comfort to become a hidden risk, a cause of disease, or even a financial trap that drains seniors who are already on extremely tight budgets? Every recall notification has a larger question at its core. Before the alarm is ultimately sounded, how many threats manage to get through? What does it say about the safety of everything else that lines grocery store shelves if the system malfunctions with something as tiny as a coffee pod? These pods represent how corporate shortcuts, covert chemicals, and disregarded safety precautions may enter your kitchen. They are more than just a convenience item. The truth becomes personal in this devastating story. Today, we present the trustworthy substitutes for the 7 big grocery chains that are launching nationwide recalls. 1. New Mexico. Piñon news came in like a crack in a coffee cup in mid-July. In 48 states, New Mexico Piñon Coffee was compelled to recall its dark piñon pods. On paper, the flaw, an inconsistent seal on the tops of 10-count boxes that allowed printed ink to seep into boiling hot brews, sounded almost comical. The FDA classified it as a low-risk Class 3 recall. However, the phrase ink in your morning coffee sounds less like minimal risk and more like a pre-dawn sucker punch to an elderly consumer in Kansas or Ohio who is already dividing their money between groceries and heart medication. The earth beneath your kitchen table trembles when a routine as routine as pouring your first cup is questioned, and the fissures are more profound. Stale, rancid oils that smell more like ruined grease than roasted beans, or pods that leak hot liquid and leave burns on worktops and wrists, have long been complained about by customers. Imagine a granny putting away pods for Sunday, only to have one explode like a miniature geyser in her Keurig, splashing hot liquid all over her hands. That is betrayal wrapped in plastic, not convenience. Then there is the authenticity myth. Although the company is proud to promote authentic piñon nuts, supply figures have never kept pace with actual demand. The nut that gives the brand its name was replaced by artificial flavorings in large-scale manufacture, according to investigations. It's similar to discovering that a slice of handmade pie is packed with flour and syrup when you bite into it. The revelation is as painful as a snake oil salesman at the county fair for pensioners who had trusted labels for decades. Another shade was added by mold recalls. Pods kept in humid warehouses ran the danger of being contaminated, which could cause respiratory problems, particularly in elderly people with COPD or asthma. A cup of comfort that turns into an ambulance ride after midnight. That's a ticking time bomb on the breakfast table, not heritage. Not to mention the human cost that is concealed outside of American shelves. The beans are linked by watchdogs to farms in Central America, where laborers, many of whom are teens, toil for less than $4 per day without safety gear, breathing in suffocating fields and chemicals. This is a harsh déjà vu for elderly Americans who used to toil away in farms or factories. The same exploitation, except presented with a smile and concealed beneath glistening packaging. An additional harsh aftertaste is added by environmental waste. As millions of non-recyclable pods fill landfills, microplastics seep into the ground and waterways. The irony is evident to seniors who once gathered tinfoil for the war effort. Today's business shortcuts erode the sacrifices of yesterday. The Piñon from New Mexico markets itself as being near nature, while contaminating the land it honors. It's similar to digging holes in the only well in a desert and selling bottled water. The knife is further twisted by political leaks. Executives undermine the very New Mexico legacy they promote by lobbying against environmental laws in their home state. That seems like a double cross to regular customers, who are cheated out of a future for their descendants. Thus, only 154 units were impacted by the formal recall. The larger issue, however, is one of exposed trust. Encased in something as commonplace as a coffee pod are mold, ink, plastic, exploitation, and treachery. Retirees and working families are left wondering what's left, if even this minor pleasure can't be trusted, because the taste lasts long after the coffee has subsided. Perhaps that is the last straw that causes people to choose safer alternatives. At least the labels of products like Dunkin' Original Blend, Starbucks Veranda pods, and even Aldi's Barissimo lines correspond to the contents. Because the comfort of honesty in a cup may be more important than coffee in these kinds of situations. 2. As the champagne of coffee pods, Nespresso loves to promote itself. George Clooney grinning effortlessly, sleek equipment, and gleaming capsules. Purchase this pod and you'll be instantly immersed in a Parisian cafe dream, the ad promises. However, the reality is less beautiful when you remove the shiny aluminum top. No amount of celebrity glitz can cover up lawsuits, exploitation, recalls, and a path of environmental destruction. The question of whether you are drinking coffee or swallowing, lies disguised as luxury, becomes starkly evident for Americans in the working class and pensioners who are trying to stretch every dollar. Even while the recalls didn't garner as much attention as others, they nevertheless hurt. Machines spitting boiling water, capsules containing shards of aluminum, and defective seals that harbored bacteria. Every case depicted a company that was too large to give a damn about the kitchen countertops of regular Americans. Imagine brewing a pod before a doctor's appointment and wondering if you're going to consume metallic pieces. That's Russian roulette with boiling water, not European sophistication. Who knows what's actually in your cupboard at the moment, even if the recall only applies to a few batches. However, safety is not the end of it. For good reason, the brand's supply chain has been a mess. While Nespresso executives spoke about sustainability, investigations have revealed that youngsters as young as 8 were hunched over in fields, filling baskets in appalling conditions. An older generation that experienced decades of corporate avarice, union conflicts, and layoffs finds this to be a crueler version of déjà vu. Imagine being sold a Cadillac, only to find out later that it was constructed with mud and barefooted kids. That is exploitation offered at a price. It is not heritage. The eco-myth follows. Nespresso declares that their metal pods are recyclable, giving them the green flag. In theory, that is, provided you can locate one of their few drop-off locations, and if the combination of metal, plastic, and coffee residue can be processed at your local facility. The outcome? The recycling rate for capsules is less than 1/3. The remainder go directly to landfills, where billions of tons are dumped annually. This is corporate betrayal masquerading as environmentally friendly theater for seniors who still rinse every glass jar and tin can out of habit. PT would be fooled by this kind of ploy. Barnum blushes. Another layer is added by legal battles. Due to the form of the capsules, Nespresso has sued competitors such as Williams-Sonoma, Peet's Coffee, and even Tiny Brands, frantically attempting to monopolize a design that was ultimately declared untrademarkable by European courts. Regulators in France even compelled them to eliminate warranty clauses that penalized users for use third-party pods. For senior consumers, this is a well-known tale. Businesses who purport to be defending you lock doors to keep away competitors. It's like a rigged carnival game, only with coffee. You never truly win, but you pay. Remember the politics, too. Nestlé, the business that owns Nespresso, has been linked to lobbying against more stringent labor rules in Latin America, thereby facilitating worker exploitation. Imagine paying for the deterioration of workers' rights halfway around the world after using your EBT card to purchase a box of pods. That's more than simply a business decision for Americans who have already battled for civil rights and higher pay at home. It is an insult to the face. The illusion has been broken even by their customer service. Complaints about jamming pods, leaking equipment, and long phone line wait times. The luxury disappears, and just frustration remains when something goes wrong. It's a pain in the neck for senior consumers who can't stand automated menus. No one on the other end cares. The coffee tastes bad, and the money is gone. Nespresso's capsule is not a representation of elegance if the shine is removed. The corporate hypocrisy is contained inside it. Legal bullying, child labor, environmental waste, recalls, and antitrust investigations. All aluminum shrink-wrapped. The choice is harsh for senior Americans who appreciate honesty as much as a hot cup of coffee. Continue to believe the hype or find alternatives that don't seem betraying. Simpler and safer brews without the sour aftertaste of exploitation are offered by brands like Dunkin', Folgers, Starbucks Veranda, or even Aldi's Barissimo. Perhaps genuine sophistication is ultimately just being honest in your morning brew. 3. Big promises were made when Tassimo arrived on the scene. barcode scanning devices, slick advertisements touting the skill of baristas, and the hope that a cafe could enter your kitchen with a single button press. However, there was a ticking time bomb hidden underneath the well-executed marketing. Following allegations that Tassimo pods were exploding, federal regulators announced one of the biggest recalls in coffee history on February 9th. Following more than 100 reports of injuries, including dozens of burn victims, more than 2 million brewers and millions of discs were removed from the market. One toddler was admitted to the hospital after suffering facial and neck burns. Consider that. Something that was advertised as a quick fix for comfort is now functioning like a landmine on your worktop. It's terrifying for elderly people who only want a safe cup of coffee in the morning before a doctor's appointment to learn that their machine might act like a kitchen grenade. But there were other fears besides burns. Due to faulty seals and bacterial development during storage, the pods themselves attracted criticism. Imagine the retiree who meticulously plans to purchase a bulk box, only to discover mold growing inside after a month. That's more than simply a ruined cup when immune systems are compromised. A trip to the emergency room is possible. Trust evaporates more quickly than steam from the spout when each pod feels like a gamble. The ethical taint follows. The parent companies of Tassimo have been connected to exploitative supply chains. Watchdog reports showed laborers, including children, picking beans in appalling conditions for pennies. Back in America, however, the packaging bragged about being sourced responsibly. This doublespeak reminds older generations of their marches for unions and higher salaries. Profits for corporations come at the expense of labor. When a reliable name is applied to the pain of children on the other side of the world, it becomes meaningless. The knife was further twisted by environmental trash. Most municipal recycling programs are unable to handle Tassimo's plastic tea discs. Processing them is nearly impossible due to the mixed ingredients and coffee residue. Microplastics leak into soil and water as millions of them accumulate in landfills. The irony is heartbreaking for elders who used to gather tin cans for the war effort. Every bit was preserved for the benefit of everyone yesterday. Corporations today preach ease while burying the world in plastic. It's similar to seeing a brand new automobile drive off with pride. The lot only to discover poison leaking into your backyard from the exhaust pipe. Safety wasn't the only thing that caused consumer outrage. Tassimo was accused in lawsuits of deceptive advertising, promising barista quality, but really providing something that was more akin to diluted vending machine sludge. Customers were left with expensive rubbish and no recourse when machines broke down within months. Long wait periods, outsourced contact centers, and evasive warranty claims were all hallmarks of customer service. Imagine a retiree trying to hear over crackling phone lines while on hold for an hour just to be informed that their machine isn't protected. Customer service isn't that. In disguise, it's corporate disdain. What about politics? Parent firms fought to maintain the flow of single-use garbage by lobbying against stricter packaging regulations in North America and Europe. This felt like a national betrayal to Americans who saw skies and rivers cleansed by hard-won rules. While corporate behemoths fund legal loopholes to avoid accountability, regular people are instructed to rinse bottles and separate cans. Tassimo was envisioned as coffee's future, high-tech, smooth, effortless. Rather, it turned into a Trojan horse. Rotten inside, glittering on the exterior. Both physical and moral scars were left by exploding pods, mold hazards, mistreated labor, plastic trash, and broken promises. Every purchase counts for seniors with tight resources. It is not only a lousy deal to invest hard-earned money in a system that provides danger rather than comfort. The back is being stabbed. Tassimo promised a luxurious cafe. What it brought was plastic-sealed betrayal, lawsuits, and burns. 4. At one point, Keurig promoted their K-Cups as the modern world's miracle. At the touch of a button, coffee. No fuss, no mess. This so-called miracle has turned into a nightmare for millions of Americans, particularly retirees who are frugal. What was once thought to be convenience has turned out to be massive waste, deceit, and danger. Just the recalls read like a scene from a courtroom play. Following complaints of explosions that sent coffee and boiling water flying into hands and faces, millions of Keurig Mini Plus brewers were taken off the market. Numerous victims suffered severe enough burns to require medical attention, a few with injuries of the second and third degrees. Imagine an elderly Michigan woman who started her Keurig for a peaceful Sunday cup before church and ended up in the emergency room due to blistering skin. Breakfast in a cup isn't what that is. That's boiling liquid Russian roulette. Additionally, the pods themselves emit sirens even in the absence of machine explosions. It has been demonstrated that pressure and heat can pull substances like styrene from the plastic into the beverage, substances connected to the hormone imbalance and cancer. The notion that their coffee may contain hidden carcinogens seems like the cruelest joke to elderly people who are managing multiple prescriptions. Their mugs were directly penetrated by an unseen danger. The environmental avalanche comes next. Over 10 billion K-cups are sold annually. Despite Keurig's assurances, the majority are not recycled because the combination of plastic, foil, and grounds is too big for nearby recycling facilities to handle. Those abandoned pods may circle the planet 10 times in a row. This isn't progress to elder Americans who grew up cleaning tin cans and storing scraps for wartime drives. It's careless wasting. Keurig was forced to pay millions in settlements and fines after it was discovered that their claims of recyclable pods were a marketing ploy. Sales of tickets for a green train that never leaves the station are analogous to this. For Keurig, the courtroom has been a second home. After creating its 2.0 brewers to reject off-brand pods, the business had to pay nearly $31 million to resolve antitrust cases. Customers were stuck, such as a rigged slot machine that only accepts coins from the house, machines that flash error codes if you dare to use them. Easy, the number. Captivity masquerading as coffee, that is. Even more sinister realities lie behind the gleaming technology. Keurig's beans are reportedly sourced from fields where laborers, including children, make less than $3 per day. Hours upon hours spent in the harsh heat, without gloves or any other protection. This is not a distant issue for elder Americans who witnessed factory closures and union battles. It is a reflection of their own previous hardships, which are being transmitted abroad. Every cup made in a suburban kitchen bears the bitter burden of misery endured by others. Keurig's hands aren't clean, even in politics. Records showed lobbying efforts to undercut domestic environmental regulations and delay labor protections overseas. The news seems like salt on an open wound for seniors who have watched lawmakers quarrel while corporations take shortcuts for their whole lives. Your coffee money supports the very lobbying that keeps workers in poverty and the environment filthy rather than safer farms or fair salaries. Not to mention the everyday annoyances, machines that malfunction in a matter of months, no warranties, unproductive customer service lines. Consider saving $150 for a brewer, only to find out 3 months later that your claim is incorrect and you are left to fend for yourself. It's not a small annoyance for someone on Social Security. The household budget is being sabotaged. Keurig marketed itself as coffee's future. Rather, it has turned into a container of corporate haughtiness. Machines that do harm, poisonous, tasty pods, waste mountains, monopolistic tactics, and exploitation-filled supply systems. These days, every K-cup feels more like betrayal than coffee to older Americans who value honesty as much as money. What was advertised as convenient was actually a scam. One plastic pod at a time was brewed. Fifth, Sensio. Sensio was marketed to Americans as the amiable substitute for the more severe pod machines. Fast, affordable, and sufficiently European to feel like an improvement without going over budget. However, what working class and senior consumers really received was a ticking hazard masquerading as thrift. Every brew tastes like betrayal because of the recalls, litigation, and conflicts that resulted from the equipment that promised foamy cafe cups. Electrical nightmares accompanied the first warning. After regulators found a flaw that may lead to boilers exploding under pressure, thousands of Sensio units were recalled. Imagine an elderly couple in a small apartment believing their $40 machine was a good deal, only to discover smoke filling the air and sparks flashing in the kitchen. The risks associated with defective fireworks shouldn't apply to a coffee maker. The Consumer Product Safety Commission alerted consumers to the possibility of burns from hot steam or even contact with live electrical components. A morning pick-me-up becomes a possible home fire with that kind of warning. It was no better for the pods themselves. There have been reports of faulty sealing allowing mold to grow inside unopened parcels. Customers who ripped up the flimsy paper pods occasionally reported discovering maggots or mildew within. It's not simply disappointing for retirees who are trying to make every cent of their shopping budget go toward ruined pods. It's disastrous. Instead than making you gag at the idea of contamination lurking in your cupboard, coffee should wake you up. Cracks in ethics are equally deep. Sensio's beans were linked by labor watchdogs to areas where workers made less than $2 a day and frequently handled pesticides without safety gear. In these fields, there are records of children as young as 10. However, the brand used phrases like responsibly sourced all over the packaging. This seems like a harsher version of history to elder Americans who have previously stood on picket lines calling for fair salaries. They repackaged it as sustainability and outsourced the same exploitation they opposed. Another unpleasant note is added by environmental devastation. The situation is less than ideal, despite Sensio's boasts that its paper-based pods are more environmentally friendly than plastic K-cups. Most recycling facilities cannot use them due to their synthetic linings. Hence, millions end up in decomposing landfills. This is hypocritical, according to seniors who grew up preserving tin cans and jars for World War II. Listening to your neighbor boast about composting while covertly spilling motor oil on the yard is like that. Although the ground has the stain, the marketing claims that it is green. Taste also turned into a battlefield. Consumer advocacy groups charge Sensio with misleading consumers with claims of European cafe excellence while providing inconsistent, watery cups that tasted more like cafeteria leftovers. Exaggerated claims and stale pods were cited in court documents, demonstrating that the divide between truth and fiction was sufficiently large to drown in. It feels like betrayal in a cup for retirees who spent a lot of money on a machine in the hopes of enjoying a modest daily luxury. The insults were more painful because of the customer service. Numerous complaints surfaced regarding continuous transfers through overseas call centers, warranties being rejected, and machines breaking down. Older patrons complained about being put on hold and having trouble navigating automated menus, only to be dismissed in the end. As one retiree put it plainly, "I paid with dignity for a cheap coffee maker." Lastly, politics further damaged the brand. Parent companies advocated against more stringent import regulations intended to stop child labor and safeguard the environment. It infuriated Americans who grew up during the struggles that led to safety laws and weekends for workers to learn that their coffee money was funding exploitation overseas. It served as a reminder that the corporate greed they fought against decades ago had only changed appearances rather than behaviors. Sensio brought risks, duplicity, and heartache, instead of the reasonably priced European sophistication that was promised. The brand has come to represent how businesses take shortcuts and risk people's lives for elderly Americans who are juggling limited funds and waning trust. What ought to have been a simple, cozy consolation became just another reminder. The powerful, fine methods to make money, even in something as simple as a coffee pod, while the rest of us suffer the repercussions. 6. Green Mountain Coffee. Roasters established its reputation as a tiny Vermont business that cares about the environment, prioritizes the community, and is dedicated to making coffee the right way. However, if you take away the mountain imagery, you'll see a mountain of litigation, scandals, and recalls instead of a pure summit. The tale of Green Mountain serves as yet another reminder to older Americans who still place a high importance on integrity and frugal living, that the most blatant promises frequently conceal the most profound betrayals. First, safety. Following reports of burns and injuries, Keurig Green Mountain was linked to the recall of millions of defective brews. Citing over 100 instances of second and third-degree burns, the Consumer Product Safety Commission fined the corporation millions of dollars for its failure to promptly report dangers. Imagine making a cup of coffee in the morning only to end up with blistering skin. That is cruelty concealed in plain sight, not convenience. Other alerts were raised by the pods themselves. When Green Mountain's plastic shells were exposed to high temperatures, independent testing revealed that contaminants, including hormone-disrupting substances, leached out. The idea of unseen toxins infiltrating a daily routine is a worrisome prospect for elderly people who are managing diabetes or heart issues. Coffee should be a source of comfort rather than a bodily chemistry experiment. The garbage comes next. Despite the company's assurances, the majority of municipal plants are unable to recycle its pods, and billions of them end up in American landfills every year. The K-Cups inventor, John Sylvan, said that he regretted making it and referred to it as an environmental catastrophe. For seniors who recall scrap drives during the war, this is not just wasteful, but also offensive. It was discovered that a company that cloaked itself in a green emblem was contaminating the exact ground it claimed to defend. Another wound is caused by financial scandals. Following disclosures that the corporation had exaggerated demand while covertly sitting on heaps of unsold stock, investors accused Green Mountain of securities fraud. Overnight, stock values fell by about 40%, wiping out regular shareholders' money. The final payment, which totaled tens of millions, closed a chapter of greed that damaged people's trust and wallets. The lawsuits continued after that. False recycling claims and devices that lock buyers into a closed system by rejecting third-party pods were the subjects of consumer lawsuits. Convenience quickly turned into entrapment for retirees. Similar to a rigged slot machine that only pays the house, a coffee maker would not brew unless you supplied it the company's own pods. The situation becomes more dire when you include lobbying activities to thwart stricter labor laws and undercut environmental regulations. The money you spend on your daily coffee does more than just purchase coffee. It also funds policies that negatively impact the lives of workers overseas and future generations at home. Green Mountain aspired to represent honesty and the pure flavor of Vermont. However, it produced trash, poisons, burns, political games, and financial manipulation. The truth is harsh for older Americans. The brand that leaves the strongest aftertaste might be the one that shouts "green" the loudest. 7. Nestlé's dominant global coffee brand, Nescafé, has long been positioned as the reliable household brand. The pods piled high on grocery shelves, the red jar, and innumerable kitchens. However, one of the most sinister corporate legacies in the history of contemporary eating is concealed beneath that air of coziness and tradition. Nescafé is more than simply a cup of coffee to Americans in the working class and pensioners who have relied on well-known brands for decades. It is a harsh reminder of how businesses can turn allegiance into treachery. First, safety. Nescafé has seen contamination issues overseas, including instances of glass fragments discovered in jars and defective seals that allowed mold or insect infestations, even though there haven't been any significant pod recalls in the U.S. that have made headlines recently. The idea of sipping coffee tainted with glass or mildew is not just unnerving, but alarming for elderly consumers who buy in bulk to stretch their finances. One false sip might lead someone to the emergency room, turning what should be a regular comfort into a gamble. The question of chemistry comes next. Nescafé was shown to have higher levels of acrylamide, a carcinogen produced during roasting, than other instant coffee brands. The idea that their energy boost could possibly be leaking is a concern for elders who are already dealing with health issues. It seems cruel to introduce toxins into their system. Their health starts to feel more like a silent pick-me-up in the morning. Even more profound are the ethical scandals. Studies have connected the supply chains of Nescafé to child labor in Brazil and West Africa, where it has been reported that children as young as 8 years old are using machetes and breathing in pesticides. Systemic abuse continues, according to watchdogs, despite Nestlé's glitzy reform promises. Every Nescafé pod becomes a stinging reminder that someone else's stolen childhood can be fueling their cup for Americans who remember protesting for equality and labor rights. Global indignation has been sparked by Nestlé's Nescafé-related environmental activities. The company's actions run counter to its sustainability mantras, from depleting aquifers in drought-stricken California to connections to deforestation in the Amazon. Older adults who witnessed the first Earth Day can recognize greenwashing easily. It feels more like spray painting rot to look new than it does being honest when a brand prints eco-friendly on a package. The mistrust is increased by legal disputes. Nestlé has been charged in class action lawsuits with misleading marketing, making money off of exploitative supply chains, and passing off goods as fair trade or ethically sourced. When consumers with low incomes discover they have been tricked into paying for forced labor, it's like purchasing a ticket to a church lottery, only to discover the money was used to enrich a casino. Another unpleasant note is added by customer complaints. There have been reports of Nescafé pods splitting in the middle of brewing, clogging machines, and producing bitter, watery coffee. The anguish of squandered money and hours spent waiting on hold with unresponsive customer support feels like insult on top of injury for senior consumers who place a high value on dependability. Additionally, while making money from the bottling of public water, Nestlé has been one of the most active lobbyists in the U.S. against more stringent water laws. It's like déjà vu for those who battled for safe drinking water and clean waterways. Families bear the financial burden as corporations privatize fundamental rights. Therefore, the narrative of Nescafé is much more than just that of subpar coffee. It is a tale of betrayed trust, youngsters laboring in hazardous jobs, forests being felled for financial gain, and misleading green labels concealing poisonous truths. Every Nescafé pod contains a painful truth for elderly Americans who judge businesses more on their honesty than their price. In the cupboard, what appears to be tradition could actually be betrayal. Coffee in the morning conceals more than just taste. It conceals treachery. Get the facts, safeguard your health, and take back control by subscribing now.